The world knows him as the man with the rubber face, the silent genius who could make millions laugh without saying a word. But behind the comedy of Mr. Bean was a man carrying years of insecurity, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion. At 70 years old, Rowan Atkinson is finally opening up about the difficult journey that shaped his life and career. Long before he became one of the most recognizable comedians on earth, Rowan was a shy boy growing up in rural England. He was born on January 6, 1955, in County Durham. Life on the family farm was quiet and disciplined, but tragedy touched the family early when Rowan's older brother Paul died as a baby. As a child, Rowan struggled with a severe stutter. Speaking in school became terrifying. Word would get stuck, classmates mocked him, and he often felt isolated from everyone around him. Some children cruelly called him an alien because of his appearance and speech. Rowan later admitted that those years deeply affected his confidence. While other children socialized easily, he spent much of his time alone. Ironically, the very thing that caused him pain would eventually become his greatest gift. Whenever Rowan stepped onto a stage and performed as someone else, the stutter disappeared completely. For the first time in his life, he could speak freely. That discovery changed everything. Even though he faced bullying, Rowan was exceptionally intelligent. He earned top grades in science and studied electrical and electronic engineering at Newcastle University before continuing his education at the Queen's College, Oxford. At Oxford, Rowan focused on advanced engineering and self-tuning control systems. Many people expected him to become a scientist or engineer. Comedy seemed impossible for someone so quiet and socially awkward. But while studying, Rowan joined the University Drama Club. It was there that his life changed forever. During rehearsals in the mid-1970s, Rowan met a young writer named Richard Curtis. Curtis immediately recognized something special about him. At first glance, Rowan looked nervous and reserved. But the moment he performed, he transformed completely. His facial expressions, physical movements, and strange comic timing were unlike anything Curtis had ever seen. Together, they began creating comedy sketches. In 1976, Rowan performed at the famous Edinburgh Festival Fringe. For the first time, national audiences saw his unusual style of physical comedy. Some people did not understand it. Others thought it was genius. But Rowan had found his path. Despite his growing confidence on stage, television executives were far less enthusiastic. The BBC rejected him multiple times. Producers didn't understand his humor, and Rowan became increasingly discouraged. During auditions and interviews, his stutter often returned, making him even more anxious. There were moments when he seriously considered giving up comedy forever and returning to engineering. But then he realized something important. When he performed as a character, the stutter vanished. He no longer needed to rely on confidence as himself. He could hide behind the characters and allow them to communicate for him. That realization became the foundation of his entire career. In 1979, Rowan created a radio comedy called The Atkinson People for the BBC. The show featured fictional interviews with strange and eccentric personalities. Although it received critical praise, very few people listened to it. Still, it proved Rowan had enormous potential. That same year, his life changed forever when the BBC gave him a role in the sketch comedy series Not the 9 O'Clock News. The show's debut was disastrous. Critics attacked it, viewers ignored it, and some even claimed it should never have aired on television. But despite the terrible reviews, BBC executives saw something promising and renewed the program. That decision would reshape British comedy forever. Rowan starred alongside Mel Smith, Pamela Stephenson, and Griff Rhys-Jones. Together, they created sharp, bizarre, and unforgettable sketches. One of the most famous moments came from the legendary Gerald the Gorilla sketch, where Rowan played a furious gorilla who turned out to be smarter than the humans studying him. The performance showcased Rowan's extraordinary physical comedy abilities. Suddenly, audiences realized he was unlike any comedian they had ever seen. Success arrived quickly, but it came with enormous pressure. Behind the scenes, Rowan was already showing signs of perfectionism and anxiety. The fast pace of television production exhausted him mentally and emotionally. By 1982, the cast decided to end the show while it was still successful. They were burned out from the constant pressure. For Rowan, walking away from fame was not about money. It was about survival. Soon afterward, Rowan reunited with Richard Curtis to create another iconic comedy series, Blackadder. The first season was ambitious, expensive, and risky. Massive sets, elaborate costumes, and large battle scenes pushed the BBC budget to its limits. Critics initially gave mixed reviews, and the network nearly canceled the show. But after winning an international Emmy, Blackadder received a second chance. The producers completely reinvented the series. The new version focused less on spectacle and more on razor-sharp dialogue and character comedy. Rowan's portrayal of Edmund Blackadder became one of the greatest comedic performances in British television history. Sarcastic, manipulative, and brilliantly intelligent, Blackadder allowed Rowan to showcase a different side of his humor. The chemistry between Rowan, Tony Robinson, Stephen Fry, and Hugh Laurie became legendary. The final season, Blackadder Goes Forth, took place during World War I and balanced comedy with tragedy in a way few sitcoms ever had. Its emotional ending became one of the most respected scenes in television history. Yet even during those successful years, Rowan struggled internally. He constantly doubted himself and rarely felt satisfied with his performances. Then came the role that changed everything forever. In 1990, the first episode of Mr. Bean aired on television. The response was extraordinary. Unlike traditional sitcom characters, Mr. Bean barely spoke. Rowan relied entirely on physical comedy, facial expressions, and visual storytelling that made the character universally understandable. People from every country could laugh without needing subtitles. Mr. Bean quickly became a global phenomenon, eventually reaching audiences in more than 200 countries. But while the world fell in love with the character, Rowan himself was suffering. He later admitted that playing Mr. Bean was emotionally exhausting. Every movement had to be perfect. Every expression required enormous physical effort. Since the character rarely talked, Rowan had to communicate entirely through his body. Filming episodes drained him completely. What audiences saw as effortless comedy was actually intense physical and emotional work. Rowan confessed that he often counted the days until filming finally ended. Still, the success was impossible to ignore. The 1997 film Bean became a massive international hit, earning hundreds of millions worldwide. Suddenly, Rowan was one of the most famous comedians on the planet. But fame only increased the pressure. As demand for Mr. Bean grew, Rowan became increasingly exhausted by the role that had made him a global icon. Eventually, he found a solution through animation. The animated version of Mr. Bean allowed Rowan to continue the character using only his voice. Without the physical strain of live-action performance, he could finally enjoy the role more comfortably. Even so, the burden of Mr. Bean never truly disappeared. In interviews, Rowan repeatedly spoke about how difficult it was to continue performing such physically demanding comedy as he got older. He worried audiences would eventually find it sad watching an aging man behave childishly on screen. Over the years, he announced his retirement from Mr. Bean several times before later changing his mind. The truth was clear. He loved the character, but the character also exhausted him. Outside of comedy, Rowan continued building an impressive acting career. In 4 Weddings and a Funeral, he played a nervous priest whose awkward wedding ceremony became one of the film's funniest scenes. Later, he created another successful comedy franchise with Johnny English, parodying the world of James Bond-style spies. The films became international hits and introduced Rowan to a younger generation of viewers. Unlike Mr. Bean, Johnny English allowed Rowan to combine physical comedy with dialogue and satire, making the role less emotionally draining. Yet even while audiences viewed him as a comedy legend, Rowan remained deeply private. He rarely discussed his personal life publicly. Rowan married makeup artist Sinetra Sastry in 1990 after meeting her during work on Blackadder. They had 2 children and stayed together for more than 2 decades. But their marriage eventually collapsed. In 2014, news broke that Rowan had begun a relationship with actress Louise Ford, who was significantly younger than him. The media frenzy surrounding the relationship became intense, but Rowan refused to comment publicly. He believed strongly in keeping his private life out of the spotlight. Away from acting, Rowan also surprised people with his intelligence and interests. Few fans realized he remained passionate about engineering and technology throughout his life. He became an early supporter of electric vehicles and collected rare luxury cars, including famous McLarens and Aston Martins. In 2023, however, Rowan sparked controversy after criticizing aspects of electric vehicle production in an article for The Guardian. The debate became heated, with environmental activists accusing him of spreading misleading information. Once again, Rowan found himself unexpectedly at the center of public controversy. Another major moment came in 2012 when he delivered a speech defending freedom of expression before the British Parliament. The speech went viral and revealed a far more serious and thoughtful side of Rowan than many fans had ever seen before. Despite decades of fame, Rowan never fully escaped self-doubt. Even after winning awards and becoming one of the world's most beloved comedians, he often described himself as insecure and overly critical of his own work. Friends and colleagues frequently spoke about his perfectionism. Nothing ever felt good enough for him. In 2022, Rowan returned to physical comedy with the Netflix series Man vs. Bee. The show reminded audiences of classic Mr. Bean-style humor, but filming proved physically exhausting. By then, Rowan was in his late 60s. He admitted that his body could no longer handle the same level of demanding physical performance. Still, audiences adored seeing him return to silent comedy one more time. As Rowan turned 70 in 2025, tributes poured in from around the world. Fans shared favorite scenes, comedians praised his influence, and younger performers credited him with changing modern comedy forever. Many people now compare him to Charlie Chaplin because of his ability to communicate humor without language. His influence stretches across generations and cultures. Even today, billions continue watching clips of Mr. Bean online. The character remains one of the most universally loved comedy creations in television history. And perhaps that is the greatest irony of Rowan Atkinson's life. The shy boy who once struggled to speak became one of the most recognizable faces on Earth. The child mocked for his voice created a character who barely needed words at all. And the man who spent his life making the world laugh quietly carried pain, anxiety, and self-doubt behind the scenes. Yet through all of it, Rowan Atkinson transformed personal suffering into timeless comedy. For millions of people around the world, he did far more than entertain. He gave them laughter that crossed every language, every country, and every generation.